There is a moment that happens to almost every retiree, usually somewhere in the first 12 months after they stop working, where they look at their bank statement and feel a specific kind of fear that nobody warned them about. Not the fear of not having enough money, the fear of watching money leave without anything coming back in. My name is Salami, and I have spent years studying the financial behavior of people who retire wealthy and stay wealthy all the way through to the end of their lives, versus people who retire with significant assets and quietly run into serious trouble 15 or 20 years later. The difference between those two groups is almost never the size of the retirement account at the moment of retirement. It is almost always the spending decisions made in the first 10 years after retirement. Today, we are going through 7 things that wealthy retirees stopped buying, not because they could not afford them, but because they understood the true cost. Let me tell you about Gerald. Gerald retired at 63 with $980,000 in his retirement accounts and what felt like more financial security than he had experienced at any previous point in his life. 2 months into retirement, his car needed a $1,400 repair. Gerald decided he deserved a new vehicle. He financed a $42,000 SUV at 6.9% interest over 72 months. His monthly payment was $634. Over 6 years, Gerald paid $45,648 for a car worth $18,000. But the real cost is what that $634 per month would have become invested instead. At 7% annual return over 6 years, $54,200. Gerald did not buy a car. He destroyed $36,200 in real retirement wealth for the feeling of deserving something nice. New vehicles lose approximately 20% of their value in year 1 and nearly 50% within 5 years. You pay a premium to own something during the period when it loses value fastest. A 3-year-old vehicle with low miles costs 40% less and then experiences the flat depreciation curve that makes reliable older vehicles so financially sensible. Wealthy retirees who stay wealthy buy reliable used vehicles, pay cash whenever possible, and drive them long past the point where they feel new. In retirement, a car payment is not a monthly expense. It is a monthly withdrawal from a finite account that no paycheck is refilling. The car in your driveway is not your wealth. The capital compounding in your account is. Thing 2. Timeshares and vacation ownership schemes. The timeshare industry generated approximately $10.5 billion in sales in 2023 alone. Consumer protection agencies receive more complaints about timeshare companies than almost any other consumer product category year after year. And yet they continue to be sold at extraordinary volume because the sales process is extraordinarily effective. Margaret and David were 67 and genuinely financially comfortable when they attended a free resort presentation in Florida. They were offered complimentary breakfast, a gift card, and 90 minutes of entertainment in exchange for their time. They attended in the spirit of a minor adventure. They were not concerned about being pressured into anything they did not want. They walked out 2.5 hours later as owners of a timeshare, $28,000 financed at 14% interest with annual maintenance fees of $1,200 contractually guaranteed to increase 4% per year. Over 15 years, their total cost was $76,173. They used the property 4 times. Effective cost per visit, $17,980. A 5-star resort would have cost a quarter of that. Wealthy retirees who stay wealthy do not attend timeshare presentations under any circumstances, regardless of the incentive offered. They understand that their financial decision-making clarity is a resource worth protecting, and that the presentation environment is specifically engineered to compromise that clarity at the moment of maximum emotional vulnerability. The only winning move is not to play. Thing 3. Adult children's financial emergencies without clear boundaries. This is the hardest item on this list. Not because it is financially complicated. The math is straightforward. It is hard because it sits at the intersection of money and love. And when those two things collide, love almost always wins in the short term and creates serious financial damage in the long term. Patricia retired at 65 with $840,000 saved, a pension of $1,600 per month, and Social Security of $1,850 per month. Then, her 38-year-old son David lost his job and went through a divorce simultaneously. Patricia gave $24,000 for mortgage payments, $11,000 for legal fees, and absorbed $33,600 in additional household costs when he moved in for 14 months. Patricia's total support across 26 months was $68,600. But retirement finance does not work in dollar amounts at the time of transfer. At age 65 with a 25-year horizon, $68,600 removed from a portfolio earning 6% annually does not cost $68,600. It costs $294,000 in lost growth. Patricia gave her son $68,600. She gave her 90-year-old self $294,000 of retirement security. The boundary that financially thriving retirees maintain is this: emotional support is unlimited and freely given. Financial support is time-limited, amount-limited, and preceded by an honest conversation about what the retirement account actually contains and what it needs to sustain over 30 years. You cannot help your children from a position of financial collapse. Thing 4. Whole life insurance in retirement. The whole life sales pitch addresses things retirees genuinely care about: legacy planning, tax efficiency, guaranteed returns, accessible cash value. The problem is not that these concerns are illegitimate. The problem is that whole life insurance addresses each of them less efficiently than simpler purpose-built alternatives, while charging fees that make it one of the most expensive retail financial products available. Robert was 68 when an insurance agent presented him with a whole life policy at $380 per month. The presentation was compelling and professional. Robert signed. 7 years later, a fee-only financial planner reviewed the policy and laid out the mathematics. Robert had paid $31,920 in total premiums. The cash value of the policy was $19,400. He had paid $31,920 to accumulate $19,400. Same $380 per month invested in a low-cost index fund over 7 years would have grown to approximately $41,500. Robert's effective return on the whole life policy was negative 39%. The opportunity cost was $22,100 on top of a $12,520 absolute loss. Independent research consistently shows whole life cash value accumulation returns between 1.5% and 4% annually. Index funds historically return approximately 10%. The commission structure on whole life insurance is among the highest in financial services: 50% to 100% of the first year's premium paid to the selling agent. This creates a structural conflict of interest that exists independently of any individual agent's integrity. When a financial professional earns dramatically more from recommending one product than another, the recommendation cannot be considered purely objective. Thing 5. Luxury upgrades bought before understanding your actual retirement life. Sandra and Thomas retired with $1.2 million saved and a sense of financial arrival that felt genuinely earned after 4 decades of disciplined saving. In their first 24 months of retirement, they made a sequence of purchases that each felt individually justified. Kitchen renovation, $67,000. Boat, $43,000. Private golf club initiation and dues, $26,400. Luxury vehicle upgrades, $58,000. Total first 2-year upgrade spending, $186,000. 4 years later, the boat had been used 11 times. Thomas played golf once per month at an effective cost of $1,400 per round, and the luxury vehicles were depreciating in the driveway. The Employee Benefit Research Institute has documented the retirement spending surge, a statistically consistent pattern in which household spending increases significantly in the first 2 to 3 years of retirement before declining as novelty fades and actual lifestyle patterns become clear. The purchases made during the surge are often illiquid, depreciating, or carrying ongoing costs that persist long after the initial excitement has gone. Had Sandra and Thomas invested the $186,000 instead of spending it at 7% annual return over 20 years, that capital would have grown to approximately $719,000. They did not spend $186,000. They spent $719,000 of potential retirement wealth. Seen as a single compounded outcome, it was the difference between a financially abundant late retirement and one that required careful management of every remaining dollar. Wealthy retirees who stay wealthy apply the experience before ownership principle. Before committing capital to any significant lifestyle asset, they access the same experience through rental or guest membership for a minimum of 1 full year. Almost universally, this process reveals whether the dream matches reality before permanent capital is committed to its infrastructure. Thing 6. High-fee investment products. Victor was a 64-year-old engineer who retired with $1.4 million. He was analytically minded, financially responsible, and had solved complex problems with precision his entire career. 6 months into retirement, he consolidated his accounts with a financial advisor who placed the entire portfolio in actively managed funds, variable annuities, and structured products with a combined expense ratio of 1.8% annually. The advisor was not dishonest. The products were legitimate, but at 7% gross return, the difference between a 1.8% fee structure and a 0.03% index fund fee structure compounded over 20 years on $1.4 million is $1.5 million. Victor did not pay a 1.8% annual fee. He paid $1.5 million across 20 years of retirement. A Vanguard Total Market Index fund would have cost approximately $50,000 in fees across the same period. The SPIVA report published annually by S&P Dow Jones Indices consistently shows that over any 15-year period, more than 92% of actively managed large-cap funds underperform their benchmark index after fees. This underperformance is structural and persistent. It is almost exactly equal to the fee differential. Active management does not fail because managers are incompetent. It fails because fees consume the margin of any outperformance before it reaches the investor. Variable annuities carry total annual fees between 2% and 3.5% when all charges are included. Their guaranteed income features, the primary selling point for retirees, can almost always be replicated more efficiently through a combination of low-cost index funds and a fixed immediate annuity. The complexity of variable annuity products exists primarily to make fee comparison difficult and to justify costs that simpler alternatives would not support. Wealthy retirees who stay wealthy invest in low-cost index funds. They work exclusively with fee-only financial advisors who earn their income directly from clients rather than from product commissions. They understand that in virtually every area of life, more expensive means better quality, and in investing, it means the opposite. Simplicity, low cost, and patience are the 3 most powerful forces in retirement investing. Thing 7. The illusion of a fixed lifestyle. Eleanor was 65 when she retired, living alone in the 4-bedroom colonial house where she and her husband had raised their 3 children over 32 years. Her husband had died 3 years before her retirement. Her children were grown and living in other cities. The house was paid off, and Eleanor had no intention of leaving it. Eleanor's annual cost of maintaining that house was $27,200, property taxes, utilities, and routine maintenance. Her total retirement income from Social Security and pension was $28,400 per year. She was spending almost her entire fixed income on housing costs alone, which meant virtually every dollar of her $620,000 retirement portfolio would eventually be required for everything else that a 30-year retirement requires. Had Eleanor downsized to a well-appointed 2-bedroom condominium for $280,000, her annual housing costs would have dropped to $8,400. She would have freed $260,000 in equity to invest. Her annual financial improvement from the single decision to right-size her housing would have been approximately $31,800 per year, nearly doubling her effective annual income. In over 25 years at 6% compounding, that decision represents over $1.6 million in retirement wealth. Eleanor stayed because the house was her identity, because leaving felt like leaving her husband, because her children expected to come home to it for holidays even though they visited twice a year and stayed 3 days. These are not foolish reasons. They are profoundly human reasons. And they are the reasons that status quo bias is particularly powerful in retirement when home and lifestyle are intimately connected to identity and grief. The lifestyle audit that financially thriving retirees conduct every 3 to 5 years is not a deprivation exercise. It is a clarity exercise. They look at every recurring cost and ask one question: is this actively contributing to the quality of my life right now, or am I paying it because I always have? That question applied honestly almost always reveals costs that serve memory rather than present life. The illusion of a fixed lifestyle extends far beyond housing. Subscription services rarely used, storage units housing furniture from a larger life, club memberships attended out of habit, insurance policies on possessions that no longer exist, second cars in households where one person rarely drives. The accumulated lifestyle infrastructure of a working life does not automatically right-size itself when that life changes. It requires deliberate examination and deliberate release. 7 things, 7 patterns, 7 decisions that separate the retirees who finish strong from the ones who finish worried. Finance new cars, timeshares, adult children's problems without limits, whole life insurance, premature luxury upgrades, high-fee investments, and the illusion of a fixed lifestyle. Let me give them to you one final time. 1. Buy used, pay cash, drive long. 2. Never attend a timeshare presentation. 3. Emotional support unlimited, financial support documented and bounded. 4. Term over whole life, index funds over complex products. 5. Experience before ownership, live your retirement before funding its infrastructure. 6. Low-cost index funds, fee-only advisors, simplicity over complexity. 7. Audit your lifestyle every few years with honesty and without sentimentality. Retirement is not the end of financial intelligence. It is the beginning of a more demanding and more consequential form of it. The retirees who finish their lives with security, dignity, and genuine abundance are not the ones who had the most when they stopped working. They are the ones who made the wisest decisions about what they stopped buying once they did. Start making those decisions now. Every dollar you protect from a bad retirement purchase is a dollar that compounds quietly into the security, the options, and the freedom that your 85-year-old self will either have or desperately wish they had. The version of yourself at 85 that you are building today deserves every one of these decisions. Make them well.